Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, or should I say konnichiwa, because in today's episode we're going to be doing a flight around Japan. Because the Olympics have just been on, I've been getting a little bit nostalgic about the trip that Liz and I did around Japan back in 2017, and I thought I'd take the opportunity to load up in Flight Sim and basically follow the trip that we did. So we went and did the pretty basic white man tour of Japan. Seems like most Australians, when they go over there, they head to Tokyo, Kyoto and Osaka. So that's what we're going to do in today's video. We're going to take off here from Haneda Airport. We're going to do a little tour around Tokyo, hopefully see some sights like Tokyo Tower, Rainbow Bridge. We're then going to head off and go and visit Kyoto, go and visit Osaka and Hiroshima, and of course talk about a few fun facts about Japan and also just our experiences while we were over there. Now, once we get up in the air and we get around Tokyo, I'm going to take away my face so you can just enjoy Tokyo and the scenery. Hopefully we won't get any lag or anything like that. And if this video ends up going for a little bit too long, I might even just have to break it up into two parts, but we'll see how we go. But for now, it's time just to get this puppy up in the air and get flying. All right, so I think it's going to get a little bit funky with our FPS here because obviously Tokyo is such a dense city, but we'll see what we can do. And already we're coming across Rainbow Bridge straight away. So this is obviously a pretty big landmark over in Japan. And I don't think it's still running. I'll have to do a little bit of research after this. But when we were here in Tokyo, Liz and I went and did a thing called Mario Kart, which if you think it sounds like Mario Kart, that's exactly right. Essentially you're driving go-karts around the city, which feels extremely sketchy, but in all fairness, the residents of Tokyo, the drivers of Tokyo were so polite. They just stay out of your way and let you do your thing, and it was an unreal experience getting to fang around in little go-karts. And we actually went up and over Rainbow Bridge here, which was just insane. It was so much fun. And that is really, really cool to see it rendered there in game. If you did that here in Sydney, you'd get run over for sure. Someone would probably jump out, stab you. There's no way they'd be as polite, that's for sure. So just up in front of us on the right, we have Tokyo Tower. We'll go and do a lap around that. It's hard to tell whether this is actually accurately done because it doesn't feel overly customized. It kind of feels a bit generic. Maybe I'm just not remembering it right, but it definitely feels just a little bit generic. I'm not sure if on the PC version, if it's a little bit better rendered, or if there might even be a download pack that you can buy for the game to give you a little bit more customized detail. The very first thing I'll say off the bat, if you are going to do a trip to Japan, which you should, once you can travel again, you need to get yourself a SIM card and just activate it at the airport over their Wi-Fi, because obviously Japan is just so dense. You have tiny little laneways everywhere, and buildings. Oh, okay, here we go. All of a sudden, it's generating the terrain. Okay, yeah. As I was saying, basically, because obviously it's so dense and buildings are so tall, you really do need Google Maps to be able to get around. It was a lifesaver for us. It did a great job of making sure that we got where we needed to go. And also just getting used to the idea that, buildings, as I say, are so tall. So even if you went to a shopping centre, it could be 12, 13 floors or stories up, which you just don't expect. Well, certainly not where we're from here in Australia. You don't expect it to be like that. So yeah, that's my first tip, is get yourself a SIM card. Make sure that you have Google Maps working for you, because it will be extremely useful should you come over here. And then the next sort of tip, I guess, would just be to walk around and just enjoy it. I mean, I'm not one for crowds, but the hustle and bustle is just insane. It's exactly how you'd expect it to be from any movie you've seen involving Tokyo, just the throngs of people. And when we got over here, actually, we landed at 6 in the morning, I think it was. And we ended up going into this little national park, which I don't know if we'll stumble across here. I probably should have put that as a waypoint on my flight plan. It could even very well be this park here. And it's basically their version of Central Park, I suppose you would call it. And even though you're in the middle of Tokyo, concrete jungle, millions and millions of people, when you're inside this park, it's just picturesque, it's serene, it's quiet, it's tranquil. And we were there just at the end of cherry blossom season, and there was all these rose or cherry blossom petals on the floor, and Liz decided that she'd pick some up and throw them in the air like a little kid. And it was kind of funny because there was all these other tourists, and I think there was even some locals that they saw her do that, and they thought, oh, we want to do that too. So then they started throwing them up and giggling and having a good time, so that was pretty cool. But you can see that just a little bit of parkland in amongst this concrete jungle. As I say, it's amazing how peaceful it was in there. And it wasn't that expensive. Like, I don't know what it was, maybe it was $5 or something like that. But it was definitely worth it considering that we'd have landed at 6 a.m. and we had all this time to kill before we actually got to go to our hotel. But yeah, so Tokyo itself, obviously the size, it varies depending on what you're looking at. The Tokyo city itself, but then you actually have Tokyo, which takes in a fair amount of different prefectures. But the greater Tokyo has 38 million residents, which for me is just insane because once again, you kind of relate everything to your homeland. So here in Australia, I think we've got about 25 million people. So just this greater Tokyo area eclipses that, and then some. And because of that, you realise that they can't muck around as far as getting people in and out of the city, their public transport. So whilst we're obviously taking to the skies here today, the rail network is just something else. And that's what we use to get around everywhere. We use the JR line, and we use the Shinkansen, the bullet train. And we'll go over that a little bit more soon. But that was just sensational using that. Now, I'm pretty sure I just saw a tagged Shinjuku building, so I'm wondering if all of a sudden all these buildings will start popping out. I was kind of hoping we'd come across the Godzilla Hotel. There's a hotel here in Shinjuku that has a giant Godzilla hanging off the side of it, which is pretty cool. Whether it will show up or not, I'm not sure. I get a feeling that the way they've rendered this city, you can see there's all these little buildings, but in actual fact they'd all be pretty massive skyscrapers. Now whether they're just going to pop up out of the ground at me or not, I've got no idea. We may just need to cut our losses and start heading to our next destination. Throughout this video as well, I'll throw some photos up of our trip just to give you an idea of, I guess, what it was like. As I say, it was so cool just to see how many buildings there are and how dense it was. And of course the food options were just insane. I mean, we have Japanese food obviously here in Australia, but it doesn't do it any justice. Ramen especially, I mean, I'd die to go over to Japan and have some more ramen. That stuff is legit. And the other cool part was just the amount of coffee places we could find. So I didn't really imagine that Japan would be a big coffee drinking nation. I sort of thought they'd be more tea and that sort of stuff, but did a bit of research, found some awesome coffee places, which I'll also list in the description below. Once again, if you're thinking of doing a trip over to Japan, I'm happy to give what little knowledge I've got. But the coffee places, they were awesome. They were a lifesaver. But okay, well that's going to be Tokyo. As I said, next we're going to head on over to Kyoto. I'm hoping it's going to be a little bit better mapped than what Tokyo is, because this is a little bit of a disappointment, if I'm honest. I thought they would have done a better job, but whether that's just an Xbox thing, whether that's just my internet connection, even though that should be fine. So let's hope that by the time we get over to Kyoto, we will see the Torii gates. And also on the way, we're going to see Mount Fuji, so Fuji-san, which is pretty special, and we'll talk more about the train as well once we get over there. So time for me to put some throttle down, and I'll see you as we get near Mount Fuji. Okay, so as you can see, Mount Fuji is off in the distance, and you can see my VFR map we're still a fair amount away, but you can already see it off in the distance there. So as we crawl towards it, I thought I'd read out a couple of facts about Mount Fuji, because we're all about the education here. As ATC gets upset at me about how low I'm flying, but don't worry about them. So firstly, Mount Fuji has a unique shape. It's got a very distinctive cone shape, which is unusual for a volcano. And yes, this actually is still considered an active volcano, even though the last time it erupted was over 300 years ago. You can go and trek Mount Fuji if you want, and apparently it's actually not that hard from what I've read. It takes about 4 to 8 hours, allegedly, and apparently an average person can do it. Then again, I suppose it depends what your view of an average person is. And speaking of climbing it, a monk was actually the first person to climb Mount Fuji. So the first known ascent was back in the year 663, so a little while ago. And it was commonly climbed by men, and women weren't even allowed to climb Mount Fuji until the 19th century. The first lady to do it, this will be a good trivia question for you, was Lady Fanny Parks in 1867. So make sure you write that one down, keep it in the memory bank. And if you want to know how tall it stands at 3,776 metres. It's the tallest peak of Japan. So Japan, not exactly overly mountainous. Now, when you do come to Japan and you jump on the Shinkansen, the bullet train, if you want to go from Tokyo down to Osaka, down to Kyoto, if you're heading away from Tokyo, so that is, as I said, from Tokyo down to Kyoto, Osaka, make sure you get a right-hand seat. So you pick what seat you want on the train. And if you can, try and pick yourself a seat on the right-hand side of the aircraft. Reason being, you'll then get to see Fuji-san from your seat. It would be considered rather rude to look over someone else's seat, barge them out of the way and tell them you're a tourist. They're not going to care, it's just going to be rude. Obviously, the reverse applies. So if you're heading from Osaka back up to Tokyo, get yourself a seat on the left-hand side. And going back to what I was saying before about Google Maps, when we were coming back, so from Osaka to Tokyo, we knew that we wanted to be on the left-hand side, that was fine. I made sure that I had a look on my phone where Mount Fuji was, because obviously, as the name suggests, a bullet train, they travel bloody fast. So you think you're going to have all this time to see Mount Fuji and it really doesn't matter, you're in no rush. Trust me, it comes and goes really quick. So make sure that you don't miss out. It is pretty awe-inspiring seeing it from the train, so you definitely want to do that. And there you have it, Fuji-san. So we're just about to do a loop around it. You can see actually the road climbing all the way out. That's pretty cool. I'm assuming that'll be a fairly long drive, and I don't think you'd want to have any seasickness issues. That's not going to be too much fun for you. That's not a bad indication of how big it is. You look at the peak there. Let me get rid of my VFR map. You don't need to see that. There's the peak, and then drops all the way down. Looks pretty impressive once you get up here, doesn't it? I mean, it looked a little bit underwhelming just before, but now that we're actually up near the top of the peak, that looks pretty bloody mad. Just above absolutely everything. You might even be able to get over the crater. Let's have a look in. Don't drop your keys, your wallet, your phone. You do that, it's gone forever. Hopefully it doesn't decide to pop off after over 300 years just as we're above it. And it looks like there's a couple of buildings on top, so they're pretty confident that it's not going to pop off, that's for sure. Alright, so now it's time to head on over to Kyoto. Hopefully we'll be able to see a couple of shrines, a couple of gates, and then continue our little Japan flight. Okay folks, welcome back. We're just about to descend into Kyoto now. So we've flown across the land of Japan and we're now just coming into Kyoto. So while we make our approach, I thought I'd just share a couple of other little facts with you, once again to keep the education levels up. So if you weren't actually aware, Kyoto used to be the capital of Japan. It was the capital for over 1,000 years. A long time ago that got changed over to Tokyo. But if you do come along to Japan and you feel like Tokyo is just a little bit too manic, a little bit too much going on, a little bit too crammed, head on down to Kyoto and it's a much quieter experience. There's a lot of emphasis on shrines, on spirituality, I suppose would be the way that I would put it, but it is a much more laid-back place. Now, the orange gates, which are pretty synonymous with Japan, the Torii gates, one of the easiest places to go and check them out is the Fushimi Inari Taisha. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. And it is quite literally across the road from the train station. So I remember when we came over, I thought, oh, I'm going to get lost for sure. But you pull in on the train and across from the platform is the entry to the Fushimi Inari temple. And it is beautiful. So that's Tokyo and Kyoto taken care of. It's now time for us just to head over a little bit south. Actually, what we'll do, I was going to head over to Osaka first, but we might as well go and check out Hiroshima first, since that's the furthest point away, and then we'll come back to Osaka. We are now just approaching Hiroshima, or Hiroshima, however you would like to pronounce it. And what I want to go and check out is the A-bomb dome and memorial park. It's pretty well documented what happened here in 1945, so we won't go over that so much, but the actual memorial is really, really nice. It's so well done and it's very respectful, you know, it's not over the top. And yeah, it's nice to come and check out. You can do it in a day, so you can take the train out from Osaka, come here, check out the memorial, and then head back all within a day. That is the memorial just below us as well. I do remember it looking just like that. And I think on the corner, that building without a roof, that looks to me like that would probably be the A-bomb dome. Yeah. So that's obviously a big piece of history, not only just for Hiroshima, for Japan, for the world. Don't need to make this episode so heavy. And of course, if you don't know what happened here back in 1945, then you probably need to go read a book or two. I'll leave that up to you to educate yourself. But okay, so that's the furthest point away in our trip today. It's now time for us to pretty much point back in the direction we've been coming from for the last hour or so. And we're going to head over to what my favourite place in Japan was, which was Osaka. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we are approaching our final stop for the day. So just like with Kyoto, this is yet again another city that used to be the capital of Japan. This is Osaka. Unfortunately, once again, not rendered all that well, which I was a bit surprised about. And we've just flown over what should have been probably one of the most famous landmarks here in Osaka, which is the Glyco Man. So you've got the whole shopping area of Osaka, which is just filled with millions of people, what it feels like. It's insane, the crowds. And essentially you've got the shopping district, you come down, you end up at the river, and it's kind of like their version of Times Square. There's big Glyco advertising, all these LED signs. It's been there in one way or another since 1935, so as I said, it is very famous. You can see that Flight Sim's just having some issues trying to render the terrain here. The feel of Osaka is absolutely awesome. Like, it feels probably the most Western out of the places that we went to in Japan. So the whole politeness and all that sort of stuff that you experience in Tokyo and Kyoto, it's not quite the same here. This is a bit more westernised. The food's awesome, the coffee's awesome. This is where we first came across a restaurant chain called Ippudo, which do ramen, and thankfully they've got a couple of stores here in Sydney, Australia, so it's pretty awesome to go and check that out, but nothing like the quality that you get over here in Japan itself. And Osaka itself was just a really nice place to tool around and explore. Just being able to experience the sheer number of people that are out and about here in Osaka was pretty special. And you have Tokyo, which kind of feels like a little bit like a concrete jungle. It's a bit grey, doesn't have too much character to it. not knocking it, just doesn't really have too much character. Then you've got Kyoto, which is your old school. Definitely has character, but it is definitely, as I say, a bit slower paced, a bit more of that old school feel and vibe. And then you have Osaka, where it kind of feels like the modern day Japan. A lot of hustle and bustle, a lot going on, a lot of sounds, noise, lights. But it is a really awesome place to come visit. And one thing as well that I probably should mention is that at no point do you feel unsafe. I mean, you're surrounded by thousands of people at any one given time, and yet you never feel like anything untoward's going to happen. It is a really friendly place to go and visit. The people are extremely friendly, so if you do happen to get lost or you need help getting somewhere, people will help you out. And just even have a simple smile will get you a long way. So yeah, that's going to conclude today's episode, really. It's been over 3.5 hours of flying for me in the real world. Hopefully this video is not 3.5 hours long. If it is, you're definitely not still here by now. But I do appreciate you guys coming along for the flight. I hope you've enjoyed the video. A little bit disappointed that the places that we've flown to today haven't shown up a bit better here in Flight Sim. But hopefully that hasn't taken away from your enjoyment of the video. If you've enjoyed it, please give us a like. Subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, and let me know where you'd like me to fly next. If there's somewhere in particular you'd like to see in game, I'm all ears, let me know. But yeah, now that all that is left for me to do is basically go back to Osaka Airport, land this puppy, and then it's job done from me. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll see you in the next episode.